Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Lowdown. It's a review show today of Game Week 2 with myself, George, and Chris. It's a game week that started with the Graham Potter derby. It saw the first ever competitive match at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, and it will end tonight, as of recording, with the custody battle over Alexander Isak. It's been a bit of an up and down game week, really. A bit of no predictions. You can't really predict Premier League football, but it was all over the place in terms of games. We'll start with one of the, I want to say, more surprising results. Manchester City nil, Spurs 2 at the Etihad as well. Some horrendous goalkeeping and defensive errors. Goals for Brennan Johnson and Palhinha. Uh, George, are City still struggling? Is this a continuation of the hangover from last season? What's going on?
It's an interesting one because we looked at City against Wolves on game week 1 and we thought, are we missing something here? Are City back? They look really good. And do you know what I said on the preview show? You've just got to be careful because Spurs are going to provide more of a test than Wolves did. They're going to be a little bit different, especially with Thomas Franken. He knows how to beat Man City at the Etihad. He's done it with Brentford before. I think he's done it a couple of times. And I mean, look, he's gone and done a masterclass there. City, why have they brought James Trafford in? I'm not quite sure. And why has Pep thrown him in the first two games? They got Ortega on the bench, who's one of the best second string keepers in the world for any team. And he's put James Trafford in there, who in the Premier League has always been questionable for Burnley. And yet, you see these mistakes happening.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one. I feel sorry for him really in the sense that he's been brought into City. He looks like he could be, the next Joe Hart almost for City in that sense. But yeah, he does seem a bit out of his depth. You're absolutely right. Thomas Frank and Spurs is the Pep Guardiola nightmare, really. Was Chris, we were talking about James Trafford, and there's rumours that are, gaining some traction that Donnarumma is going to be leaving PSG and joining City, and Edison is on his way to Turkey. Do you think Donnarumma can actually fix this? Is it fixable?
I think it is. I think when you look at signing keepers like James Trafford, we saw it with what happened with David Raya in his first season at Arsenal, where Raya wasn't really a competent goalkeeper. We hadn't seen much special from him. And yeah, he won the Golden Glove that season, but he didn't win the Golden Glove in his first season because of how good he was. It was how Saliba and Gabriel were in front of him. And I think that's part of what Pep's brought Trafford in for, is he seems to be relying more on his centre back partnership than his actual keeper, and they've been figured out there essentially. I don't think Donnarumma is the answer because he's a very hot and cold goalkeeper, and PSG first half of last season and second half of last season is a prime example of that, because the first half of last season he's had an absolute disaster class in the league phase against us, and then the second half of the season he's had an absolute worldie, and it just shows how hot and cold of a goalkeeper he is. And in the Premier League, that's not something you can get away with.
Wonder if having two goalkeepers like Trafford and Donnarumma, who are both hot and cold, I think is fair to say. I wonder if having both of them is a case of, okay, James Trafford's on form now, and Donnarumma's had an absolute stinker. Let's swap him out and then swap him back. The issue with that is, and like I said, I feel hard. I feel pity for James Trafford. You've got this big move back to City to finally claim your spot as their number one, and he's already signed somebody else to replace you. It feels that I would feel hard done by if that was the case. Obviously, not taking anything away from Tottenham, who played exceptionally. They were, for the large parts of the game, the better team, and they capitalised on City's mistakes and forced them, as opposed to City, putting it in their own net almost. With Thomas Frank in charge, with these new signings, with this new look Tottenham that is very similar to the old Tottenham, but a little bit different. George, could Spurs finish higher than City? What do you reckon?
I think the answer to this question is Tottenham are always going to be Tottenham, and there will be that part of Spurs and the experience of being in a title race, being in a top four race that's going to make them falter. And I think the simple answer is Spurs are never going to finish higher than Man City. unless something radically changes, unless these charges come in and I get a massive points reduction. Because you look at that Spurs squad and you look through it, and is there anyone that's had that big moment experience where the pressure ramps up? There's still quite a few in that City squad that have. You've got Pep in charge. Thomas Frank's been in charge of Brentford. Has he ever really been in a relegation battle in the Premier League? They've always been quite steady. So I see lots of positives with Spurs, and they'll keep plodding along, and I think they're going to do well this season. I think they'll finish sixth and have a good year, but they're never, unless something massively changes, going to be in that race for the top spots in the league.
I think what we're not talking about here is that this game coming at the start of the season has shown exactly how these two teams are. We know City just turn it on in the second half of the season, and we know Tottenham start fantastic in the first few games of the season and then fall off. And obviously Spurs are not going to go down as low as they did last season, but I think 6 might be a bit generous to them. I don't think they've got the squad still to compete, especially in Europe. Just in terms of having European football as well, and Thomas Frank's first season as well, and his first taste of European football, I think that's going to be something that catches up to them. As for City, they've cleared out a few names this summer, and I think this start to the season has shown what a loss Kevin De Bruyne is, because while he's not got the ability, he is undoubtedly their biggest leader in the team, and there's not really anyone in that team who strikes me as a leader other than Ruben Diaz.
Yeah, I think again the important point is this is game week 2, so everything can change between now and the end of the season. It is interesting though that the Arsenal supporter thinks that Tottenham aren't going to get European football.
That's it.
Who could have predicted that? Yeah, exactly. Okie dokie then. Moving on to the game that I mentioned earlier, the Graham Potter derby. Um, West Ham looked good in the first 10 minutes, scored a goal, we're leading, everything was going well. And then Chelsea decided to wake up and scored 5. Joao Pedro, man of the match with a goal and 2 assists. But the tough one for FPL fans like myself, Cole Palmer went off injured during the warm up and didn't actually play the game. Chris, do you think Cole Palmer being injured, is that a big miss for Chelsea? I mean, they still went on and won 5-1 and Joao Pedro was excellent, but is missing him going to impact their season, do you think?
I don't think so too much, because we saw what he became in the second half of last season, and everyone has figured him out now. He can't. It seems to be the tactic now is to double team Palmer when he's on the ball, and
excuse me.
he doesn't seem to be able to manage that sort of thing. So I don't think he's going to be that much of a miss, and I think it's going to force Chelsea to sort of adapt their game plan, which we saw on Friday night. And I think that's exactly what happened. Was the first few minutes, the game plan had to change at the last minute because Palmer's dropped out of the team. Chelsea haven't settled in. West Ham have scored. It's woke them up, and they've come out and done that sort of thing.
Yeah, I have to admit, again, I think Joao Pedro is an excellent signing for Chelsea and really stepped up, certainly during the Club World Cup, and then in this game as well, really stepped up. Let's flip it slightly then. George, West Ham still pretty poor, still without a win. They've scored a goal. That's better than some of the teams we'll talk about later. Graham Potter, though, his tactics and his players still not really kicking on. Do you think he could be the first manager to get sacked this season?
I said in my predictions that he was going to be the first manager to get sacked this season, and I said that West Ham wouldn't go down. They would be in the relegation zone until they sacked him. Then they'd bring someone in with good leadership, and they'd keep them up. Because West Ham are a massive team. You can't deny that. They're a Premier League team, and there is a lot of talent in their squad. I mean, you look at the defence, you look at Wan-Bissaka, you look at Todibo. There's quite a few players in there that are quality players, and most teams in the Premier League probably would take them. It's just not working, whatever the system is. I think I saw something today on Twitter about fans being frustrated with the London Stadium. They've been frustrated with that for years, but there is something about that bowl that's a little bit soulless, and that you can't quite get the atmosphere going. And when Upton Park, that teams used to go away there, it was a scary place to go. The London Stadium, teams go there and they play however they want. And at the moment, West Ham don't have that fear factor about them. A few years ago, when they were doing well, when they were flying high, they'd go away to teams and they'd win. And it wasn't a surprise, it wasn't unexpected. But at this current moment, people are looking at West Ham and thinking, well, that's 3 points, and something needs to change in order for them to improve this season.
If there's one thing you can bank on in the Premier League every season, it's West Ham conceding 5 in a game. It seems to happen every season. It's normally us who do it, actually. But I think the thing is, as well, is one thing I've always said about relegation is it's not always a bad thing. And I think a lot of the times when you're down there and you're fighting for survival, and they came off from it and obviously won the Conference League and things like that, but they just never kicked on. And the thing for kicking from the bottom three is kicking on from the first season or two of surviving, and they never really did after that European win. And obviously the players that they've lost over the years since that haven't helped. And they struggled with Kudus last season, and now they're going to struggle without him, obviously. But there's not really always a negative to relegation. And I think in a team like West Ham's case, falling down to the Championship could help. I think a season in the Championship where they're obviously, they go down to the Championship, they're most likely walk the Championship in their season they go down after they go down. And that gives them some confidence coming back up to the Premier League.
Yeah, I do think if they do go down, the thing is they're not going to be able to hold on to some of their bigger players. Jared Bowen came out after the game, obviously as captain, and said, he's not happy with some of the performances of the players and that it's on him to kind of lift them. And actually, when you lose to newly promoted Sunderland on the opening day and then get thumped 5-1 by Chelsea, you've got to be looking internally in the squad. So I wonder if maybe there's some reaction from the players that can actually lift the team. But I mean, for me, Graham Potter hasn't really brought anything to West Ham. They were never going to get relegated last season, but I think Chris, you're absolutely right. Potentially going down could be beneficial for them, but it would be then a question of can you keep hold of really important players like Bowen, who in times do it all on their own. We've joked before about West Ham need to hire a chiropractor because his shoulders are going to be in absolute pieces from carrying the team all the time. So I wonder if maybe this kind of run of results will actually make him look to finally get that move somewhere else. Moving on then to another bizarre game in which I didn't predict it because I thought Sunderland would actually kick on after their opening match day win. Burnley Sunderland, two new teams. I mean, 12 months ago, this was a championship game, and we wouldn't have even bothered covering it on the Premier League Lowdown. What did you make of the game then, George? Goals from Cullen and Jaden Anthony.
I mean, I think Burnley have played it really well. You've got to look at the game as a whole, and Sunderland did have their chances, particularly in the first half, but then Burnley have taken their chances. That's the difference in this one. They've taken the lead through Cullen with a great strike, by the way, lovely curling finish into the bottom right-hand corner, and then they've got another goal late on just to seal the deal. So it's the perfect performance, really, from a Burnley perspective. A clean sheet, win at home in front of the fans to lift things. The fact that all the promoted sides have actually got 3 points is amazing. We've not seen that for ages in the Premier League. So really good win for Burnley. I don't think a disheartener for Sunderland because I think there were positive aspects of their performance and they've got to look at those this season. They're not going to win every game, but they've got to count on those positive aspects if they want to kick on. So yeah, I think positives for both sides, but well done for Burnley for getting those 3 points early on.
Yeah, I mean the thing is these games where you're going to be playing teams that are going to be near the bottom for you, the cliche is that they're 6 pointers, and we might look back on this game towards the end of the season when one or both of these clubs are in the relegation zone and say, actually, maybe that's a game that Sunderland should have won, or Burnley can look at it and say, well, we won that game, but we're still in the relegation zone and Sunderland aren't. So what? Where else did it go wrong? So these games, although they're early, they're still really important. And Burnley will definitely, you're right, look at this positively. Chris, what did you make of it? Obviously, you're a big fan of all the promoted clubs this year, and you don't think any of them will go down. So are you looking at this? Is this ticking all the boxes for you?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing about staying up in the Premier League for these clubs is turning your home games into a fortress. And all three of them have done that already. All three of them have won their first home game of the season. Leeds have won an opening day at home. Sunderland have won their opening game at home. Burnley have now won their first home game. They've all started exactly how they need to go on. These home games need to be where they cause problems. And we know teams like Burnley in the past. Burnley used to be one of the worst places to go for some of the top six. A lot of top six fans absolutely hate going to Turf Moor. Same for Stadium of Light back in the 2000s era was absolutely horrendous. I know Alex is a big fan of the Stadium of Light as a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, yeah, man. Love beach balls and Victor and Ichibi and Darren Bentby. I'm a big fan of all three of those, the Holy Trinity.
But these are the points that are going to change your season, and it's absolutely a 6 pointer no matter how early on it is. And the fact that it's come on so early in the season is almost a boost because these are the teams you're familiar with having come up from the championship together. Not too surprised in the fact that Burnley have pulled off a win at Turf Moor over Sunderland, given that it's an automatic promotion team against the playoff winners. I know it doesn't mean so much, but it's just one of those where. But I think if Burnley are going to stay up, it'll be by the skin of their teeth. We're certainly in for a lot closer of a relegation battle than we've seen in recent years, I think.
Yeah. So, moving on then, swiftly, talking about the importance of home games, moving on to a club that is now in a brand new home stadium. The first competitive match at the Hill Dickinson Stadium for Everton. Everton versus Brighton. 2-0 win, two assists for Jack Grealish. His first start for Everton. I think he looked pretty good. Um, Defensively rocky from both teams, I'd argue. I think Brighton definitely could have pulled it back, definitely could have won the game. They were a bit all over the place in terms of finishing. Obviously, had a penalty saved as well. Thanks for that, Welbeck. That will go really down quite nicely for my FPL team. Um, and I mean, the James Garner goal was an absolute screamer, a lovely, lovely hit. The big talking point for me, I mean, James Tarkowski was one player that I thought had an appalling game, but I think a lot of the focus is going to be on Jack Grealish and how good he was. I mean, in that game, he looks like the £100 million player that City had spent money on in the past. So, George, is Grealish going to be back at his best at Everton?
I think there's a higher chance than if he stayed at City that he's going to be back to his best. I think the difference yesterday that we saw at City was that he had a bit more freedom. He didn't have the pressure on him to do something spectacular all the time. And actually, he could be himself. And I think there's a few players in the Premier League that do need that freedom to just do what they want. And Jack Grealish is one of those. We saw it at Aston Villa, and that's why City spent the money. And you put him in an environment where he can't quite do that, and he's under massive pressure, massive scrutiny all the time, and he can't just try a trick or two. At Everton, he can, and you saw him quite a few times yesterday take on the fullback, go past him, and put a cross into the box. That's how Everton's first goal came, and that's the brilliance of Jack Grealish. I'm sure there'll be a few goals this season where we see him cut inside and curl into the top corner because that's what he can do, but it's not what he's been allowed to do in the last few years at City. So I think there's a real chance that he's going to have a really positive season. And look, I hope, because it's a joy to watch him, that he will be back to his best.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is there's a fine line between he obviously at Villa he was a big fish in a small pond and he moved to City and became quite a small fish in quite a big pond. And like you say, the structure and rigidity of Pep Guardiola football meant that he couldn't always express himself. I think now he's at Everton, and I'm sure Blues fans won't mind me saying it is a smaller pond than the City as a club. And I think he's going to relish being that big player for them when they need it. But you're right. having the scrutiny maybe less on him is probably going to benefit him, and he is going to have more freedom. Chris, do you think that he is, the missing piece of this kind of David Moyes Everton side? Do you think this is going to benefit them, or is this actually, this is just a flash in the pan kind of performance?
Yeah, I don't. It's an odd one because I don't really see him being a player who fits a David Moyes system too much. Um, I'm a huge Grealish fan. I think one of the biggest problems for him was that Pep just does not like the way Grealish plays. He's not the type of player Grealish. He's not the type of player that Pep is normally fond of. He's coached one of his best attributes out of him, which is running at defenders with the ball. A lot of defenders just can't handle Grealish when he's on his game, and he's just running at the defense. A lot of defenders can't handle him. And I think a lot of this is going to be there's a World Cup next year. He's not been in the England squad for a while. He's going to be looking at players like Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho and players like that who've been left out of the England team for so long, and thinking, I now have an opportunity to get into that squad for next year's World Cup. Probably be his last chance to play at a major tournament for England as well. So I think he can keep it up, but if he's going to keep it up, he'd have to be keeping that World Cup on his mind.
You're Gareth Southgate then, Chris, and perhaps he does keep up these performances. Let's say, based off this match week, are you picking Jack Grealish to go with you to North America for the World Cup?
I'd be asking Gareth Southgate what he's doing there first, to be fair.
That's it.
I mean, in fairness, yeah, that is completely right.
Uh,
Maybe I meant Thomas Tuchel, and we
uh,
should we should forget about that.
I don't think you could look at this game. I think he's absolutely. If he has another weekend like that coming up, he has to be in the next squad for friendlies coming up. That's coming up, especially with players coming out of teams injured already. So I think you see how he goes. If he has another good weekend, he's in the next squad for friendlies. And if he's performing well and he takes this form throughout the first half of the season, maybe he falls off a bit in the second half of the season, but he still has some solid performances as well. He's absolutely in that England team next summer.
Right, well, I'll apologise already to Thomas Tuchel for forgetting that he was even appointed as England manager, because that's quite poor. Moving on to Brentford versus Aston Villa. Things not quite going as well as they could for Villa. They've now drawn on the opening day and now lost to Brentford, who have undergone massive changes, losing their coach, captain, star striker, potentially other star striker as well in Visser, who just refuses to have anything to do with the club at the moment. A debut goal for Dango Utara. George, what did you make of the game?
I mean, it's a really positive result for Brentford because after game week 1, we were all questioning them a little bit and thinking, are Brentford going to struggle this season? I think there was a few murmurs before the season that this is going to be a struggle with Visser leaving, most likely, and Bomo leaving. Those are their two big focal points. They brought in a focal point in Ouattara, and hey, it's paid off. It was a bit of a scrappy goal the way that he got it, but it was still a bit of individual brilliance to get there in the first place. And that's what you need. That's what Brentford need. They need someone that's going to excite the fans, that's going to run defenders, run in behind. That's exactly what he did. And hey, Brentford have played the game really well. They've managed to keep Villa out, who haven't quite clearly going forward been as dangerous this season. We saw game week 1. I know they got a red card, but they still struggle to create chances. Watkins, is he getting the service that he needs? You've got Morgan Rogers, who, hey, had a really good chance, but wasn't able to convert it. So it's a question of the two. I think it's massive for Brentford, though, that they have got that first win. Just brings a little bit of relief to the whole camp. Villa, though, I think they're a talking point that are going under the radar a little bit. That are they at the same level as they have been the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think the question really, I think, it's got to be, if you're Chris, if you're, let's say you are both a Brentford fan and a Villa fan, you're a 50-50, bizarre split. Who are you more, which team are you more worried about? Obviously, you think that Brentford are potentially going to go down, but they've now started the season with, a win in match day 2. They're trying to resolve the Vissa situation. They've proven that they can score goals without him and Mbeumo. Well, at least goal anyway. Um, Kelleher, I thought looked really good. Not just saying that because he's a former Liverpool fan, but as George touched on, Villa kind of slipping away from where they have been. Watkins not looking great, and potentially Morgan Rogers has been linked with a move away as well. Who are you more worried for as a fan? Would you be more worried as a Brentford fan or a Villa fan, Chris?
I'm more worried about Brentford, and I'm going to correct you on Watkins a bit there because I absolutely agree with George that he's not getting the service. I pre-season, I backed him to score 20 goals after watching him in pre-season because he scored in every pre-season game. He was on absolute fire during pre-season, and I think George is right, but he's not getting the service. I don't think with the way they've been depleted, I don't think that Brentford have the squad to survive anymore. There's no real stars. They've lost some senior figures as well. They don't really have an established manager. There's a lot to be concerned about at Brentford. And the one thing that they don't have over everyone else that would be down there in the bottom three is a manager who's been there, done that sort of thing. And other than Scott Parker's not really been there, done that, but Graham Potter with West Ham, he's excelled. He's took a Brighton team. He's the main part of the reason why Brighton are what they are today. Yes, he's fell off a bit, but I think that Chelsea job can absolutely knock someone's confidence. Probably not a Premier League quality manager anymore, but that Chelsea job can easily knock someone's confidence with how ruthless they are with managers. So I just think that the inexperience of a manager like Richards is going to catch up to Brentford, especially with a smaller squad now.
Yeah, I mean, I think although this result, obviously, Brentford fans are going to be happy about it. I wonder if it's something they can continue. But I think we're all right that both Brentford and Villa fans have got some tough weeks ahead where they've got some tough question marks over some of their players. And I mean, Villa will want to rectify this as soon as possible. But yeah, I think George is right. They do risk slipping away from what they had. Okie dokie. Moving on to the most bizarre derby that's emerged this season. Crystal Palace and Forest, who now absolutely hate each other because obviously Nottingham Forest taking Crystal Palace's spot in the Europa League after Crystal Palace were demoted to the Conference League. 1-1. Actually, a really interesting game to watch, really back and forth, some really good quality on display not just attacking, I think defensively, I think both goalkeepers as well. I think Sells has absolutely proved why he was in the PFA Team of the Year and some good goals. Ismail Assar and Hudson Odoi, some really good goals. The question I'm going to put to you then is um, just think about this, both of you. Who do you think finishes higher this season and why? So, George, I'll go to you first. Who do you think finishes higher out of Forest and Palace this season?
Oh, it's a really tough one because they're both quite even. I can't quite remember who I put higher in my actual predictions. I think I put Forest higher. And I think that was mainly just because of the fact that Palace have obviously lost Eze. Big focal point now. Look, Palace are a squad who have got absolute quality. You've still got Mateta up there. But Forest have also brought in a few. They brought in McAtee from Man City. They might bring in a couple more as well. And I don't know if Nuno does stay. I just think Nottingham Forest might adjust better to having that European football. I think there's just almost a little bit more experience. There's not much between them, but there's a little bit more that convinces me that they'll finish higher. I don't think it'll be by much. I think it'll be quite close. But I do think both of them are going to have a good season. It was a really evenly matched game. I've got to give a shout out as well to, I think, Dan Ndoye, who played the ball for Hudson Odoi's equaliser, because, oh my word, what a pass that is. And a brilliant finish as well from Hudson Odoi to cap it off. But yeah, it's going to be tight between the two this season, but I think Forest will just about edge it.
Yeah, and Chris?
I'm going Palace. I have my concerns about both. I think Forest have a tougher level of Europe. Or Forest obviously have a tougher level of European competition to compete in. Palace still not guaranteed European football yet this year, so obviously you'd expect a team like Palace to go through these, but they've only took a narrow 1-0 lead away, sort of thing. Anything can happen. And I'm not saying Palace are going out in the Euro Conference League qualifying. Don't worry. I know I've had some outlandish opinions in the past, but I think George is right. There's huge concerns for both teams. They've both lost a key player this summer. Palace obviously have less time to replace. The Eze deal has moved very quickly, but I also think they should have been prepared for this. Same time, do they get a replacement in? When you look at who owns the club, who has turned the New York Jets into what they are in the NFL now. So it's just a case of that. George is right. Forest recruitment has been really well, but I still think that European competition is going to creep up on Forest and they're going to struggle. But both have some really tough questions to answer with the players they've lost in the summer transfer window. And Palace have the least amount of time to react.
Yeah, I think the other confusing kind of drama that's come out of Forest as well is about whether they are going to keep Nuno Espirito Santo, who has produced some of their best football in recent history. I think the relationship between him and Marinakis could make or break the season, because if they get rid of him, I mean, there's potential that you get a better manager in, but whether that works is a big question mark. And also, if there is a better manager available willing to take that job, is the other challenge. I think both teams, it'll be really interesting to see where both teams are at the end of the season in terms of, have they developed the talent to replace the players, like you say, Chris, that they've lost. And it will also be really interesting to see the reverse fixture of this game, to see when they do go to the City ground in Nottingham, to see whether it's still as equal as it is in this past game week. Because yeah, George is absolutely right. It was a really, really close game. Um, Moving on then to the South Coast, where Bournemouth beat Wolves. Wolves still without a goal this season. 1-0 loss. And their striker that they, would hope would replace the goals of Mateus Cunha, Strand Larsen, he's been linked with a move away. Um, Chris, what did you make of Bournemouth and Wolves then? A bit of a sad affair, really.
Yeah, I think it's about what you'd expect from a game like this. Wolves aren't really going to be an entertaining side to watch this season with the players that they've lost. Not are you really surprised that they failed to score a goal still in the first two games with who they've lost as well? I think the Strand Larsen move is absolute madness and just shows how mental the current transfer market economy has gone in recent weeks with transfers. So I think Bournemouth keeping a clean sheet is a massive bonus for them as well when you look at the defenders they've lost. I had them to kick on this season from last season's performances. I really backed them to nab some European football for themselves last season, but didn't fail. They fell short, and I thought if they're going to improve, they're going to kick on from it and get it this season. But they've sold 3 defenders and just don't see them replacing anyone that they've lost. They've got the money to improve the squad, but I don't see them replacing anyone that they've lost.
Yeah, I think two teams really that have lost quite key players over the summer, and it was almost a tale of the two reactions to that. Bournemouth, really needed a result after the opening match they lost to Liverpool, in which they were really good. They played very well. They were just maybe outclassed slightly. Here it was a case of the other way around. I think they kind of outclassed Wolves, and this is the difference in two teams that, like I say, they've both lost key players in the summer, but one team has obviously replaced them very well. George, what did you make of the game then?
I'm worried for Wolves. I'm really worried for Wolves because I had them to go down, and that's looking. I know we're only 2 weeks in, but it's looking like a fairly good prediction because they've not shown in either game. Look, you've got Man City at home opening day. They got absolutely battered, and sometimes that's what happens with City. But they didn't really put much threat on the Bournemouth goal. You watch the highlights and it's all Bournemouth. They score early, then Semenyo has a great chance. They have good chance in the second half as well. And it just doesn't look like Wolves necessarily have that X factor that they had when Cunha was in the side, because when Cunha was in the side, it's a little bit like when Grealish was at Villa a few years ago. Everything went through him, and that dragged Wolves through those moments where they just needed something. And right now, they don't have that player that will just drag them through and get them something, maybe like they have in recent years. I think it's going to be difficult for them, and they need to bring someone in. I can't quite believe that Jurgen Strand-Larsen, that Newcastle are willing and so desperate that they'll pay 50 million for him, and that's been rejected. I mean, like you said, Chris, about the transfer market economy and what we're in now, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I'm worried for Wolves. They need to bring someone in that's gonna be that man to drag them through and carry them.
The main problem for Wolves is their reinvestment into the side seems to be non-existent. And I said this to Alex a couple of weeks ago, that they are treading really, really thin ice. And they're a team who've done this before. They've fell out the Premier League and they fell to League One. And you think under this ownership model, under the way the ownership is with reinvestment, they fall to the Championship. They lose a lot of the names that they have currently. How much of Wolves' side do you see? You look at the sales that have been made over the years. Kilman left last summer. No one was really bought in to replace him. And then they had some solid defenders who then got injured towards the start of the season. Again, not really any replacement when there's time to react to that injury. There's still nothing brought in. Cunha's gone. Some hefty price tag for Cunha come in. Not seen much reinvestment for that name. There just seems to be no care for Wolves' the squad right now. And I would not be surprised to see them slip to League One again. With how tough the Championship can be. You saw Luton. They're two very different clubs, but you saw Luton fall out of the Premier League and fall straight to League One. It's one of those cases where, would it happen immediately? No, but 4 or 5 years down the line, I could absolutely see Wolves in League One, the current state they're in.
Wow. So, Chris, saying that Wolves are treading on thin ice and could very well fall into the frozen lake that is League One. Moving on then to Chris's team, Arsenal. They absolutely outclassed Leeds. I think it's fair to say 5-0. There are some good signs from Leeds. I think on the opening day they impressed me. I think in how much they kind of took the game to Everton. This game, I don't think they were expected to win. I don't think that's unfair on Leeds fans. What I will say is that when they did come up a couple of years ago under Bielsa, they would be looking at games like this and saying, well, we might as well at least, put up a fight. And that's where they kind of snatched some points. I think they didn't quite bring that this time. But like I said, Arsenal kind of outclassed them, really. Gyökeres's first goals. But there were some concerns. Ødegaard obviously had to come off with an injury, and Saka is also injured. Chris, I'll come to you second. But George, do you think Gyökeres is the real deal? Has he arrived? Is he good? I don't know.
Well, hey, I think him getting those 2 goals are absolutely massive. To get them early on, take the pressure off, that's big for him. I think there's lots of attributes about Gyökeres that could make him a fantastic striker. Look, he's not going to hit the levels that Haaland did when he came into the Premier League, because Haaland is one of those players that is just on another level, but he can still be a very, very good Premier League striker. A little bit like when Alexander Isak came into the Premier League. He's got those good physical attributes. He's quick. He's confident as well. The way that he took that goal, that he gets the ball down the left-hand side, he cuts inside, takes a defender with him, takes him out of the game and just puts it through another defender's legs into the bottom left-hand corner. That's the sign of an intelligent striker. We know he's intelligent. He scored 40-plus goals in less games in Portugal last season. I think the age of him as well, obviously he's 27 or 28, around there. He's coming into his prime, and that's massive for Arsenal. Whether he's what they need to take that next step and win the league, I think it's definitely a part of it, but I think there still needs to be a little bit more. Whether that comes with Eze as well, I still think Arsenal need a little bit more to take that next step. But it's definitely positive signs. It's definitely giving them something that they haven't had, and I think it's massive for them, that confidence boost, getting those 2 goals. I was impressed, and I was impressed by Arsenal. But you're always going to get a big scoreline against a team like Leeds when you score early, because they're a team that will just keep going for it. The space will open up. And that's exactly what Arsenal did. Credit to them.
And Chris, I already know that you are a big Gyökeres fan, hence why you won't stop doing his celebration. You've got his name on the back of your shirt. You absolutely love him. My question really for you though is obviously Saka's out injured. We've got the news today that as well he's going to miss the Liverpool game, which I know it's early on in the season, but could be, sometimes we look at these games as almost title deciders, even though they're early on. Last season, injuries to Saka and Ødegaard kind of derailed Arsenal's season. Is this something you're worried about, even though it's so early on? Or are you actually not that worried because, you've got Eze in now, and like I say, it's quite early on. What do you make of the injury news?
I think it's a little concerning to see Saka's injured so early on in the season. A lot of that is how he's defended in games. He's fouled so frequently because a lot of the times it's the only way to stop him. He's very much the same as what I said about Cole Palmer. Part of the reason he's been quieting down a bit is because he's teamed up on by defenders. But one interesting thing that was mentioned was last week how I think somebody noticed that in an open training session, Saka was playing on the left and Madueke was on the right. And I think if you did put Saka on the left, you add a bit of unpredictability back to his game because you just don't know how he's going to play there. And we saw how well that works adding Mikel Merino as a striker last season. You don't know how he's going to play. She just becomes unbelievable. I think in terms of the injuries, the problems have been answered with this recruitment this summer. Eze in, Madueke in, who got Nwaneri, who I worry for because could he fit in? I don't know. I worry for how many minutes he's going to get, and maybe a loan move out to Europe would benefit him. But then Saka gets injured, and you need him. And now you've got Dowman coming through as well at 15, who looked really good in pre-season, and you wouldn't have guessed he was a 15-year-old coming on for his Premier League debut on Saturday either. Won the penalty. I know a lot of people are calling it a dive, but I think there's some slight contact. I haven't seen fully yet, but I don't think for Leeds you can fault conceding 5 to an attack like ours. I think there's so much in Arsenal's attack now that you can't fault conceding goals. So, but absolutely, again, when it comes to Ellen Road, you can't be conceding 5. You can go to the Emirates and concede 5. You can't concede 5 at Ellen Road.
Yeah, I think Leeds really need to kind of look at themselves a bit, and maybe they're picking and choosing which games that they know they can definitely win. And I think the Everton one was, we talked about 6 pointers earlier. That was definitely one that they'll consider a 6 pointer. But I think when you're coming up against a team that are title contenders, Champions League contenders, you can't be too disappointed with it. Perhaps the method of the loss, the fact that it was 5 goals, maybe that's the difficult part. But I think they weren't expected to win. They just would have liked to have put up more of a fight. Moving on then to George's team, Fulham versus United. Personally, I thought this game was a bit boring, really. United drew 1-1. Bayern, they're still getting in the team ahead of Onana, although there is a new goalkeeper coming in. George has got his head in his hands. For me, I thought defensively they were still a bit slow and poor, and that's the area that's kind of let them down. I think maybe Luke Shaw should have gotten to that ball that came across. And I think the front three haven't quite gotten going yet. I mean, there were certainly some impressive aspects of them in the Arsenal game, but I don't think anybody was blown away by their performance at Craven Cottage. George, what did you make of your team's performance? I know you don't agree with me, but let's hear what you have to say anyway.
I think there's a few different points. I think defensively, on the goal, it's on De Ligt and it's on Bruno Fernandes because Bruno loses his man, and in Smith Rowe, that's who scores the goal. De Ligt switches off. He thinks the ball's going back to the goalkeeper. But other than that, De Ligt and Euro look like a really solid defensive partnership. Luke Shaw, when he's fit, is a really good player. Everyone in the Premier League knows this. When he's fit, he's one of the best fullbacks in the league. So defensively, United are pretty solid. The goalkeeper issue is a big issue at the moment because teams have found out what works, which is get on the keeper on corners because it makes them nervous and that brings an anxiety to your defence and your whole team as well. Because every single time you've got a corner, it's like having a penalty kick because there's a decent chance that the ball's going to go in the back of the net. And quite a few times yesterday, Bayindir is getting out-muscled and outnumbered by Fulham players. So they really need either Onara and Bayindir need to learn how to defend corners, and there's got to be some work on that training, or you bring in a goalkeeper like Lamans, who is a young goalkeeper, which is the slight worry, but let's hope that he can defend corners and be a little bit more authoritative in the penalty area. We saw Raya do it fantastically last week because we tried to do the same thing back to Arsenal, but he's practiced in that area. Going forward, United looked really good in parts. The first 10 minutes, we were fantastic, by the way. Really, really good at the start. Really nice bits of play between Dorgu and Cunha. Mason Mount looks like a new player. Where he fits in that Manchester United team is really difficult because Amorim's system, we've almost got too many number 10s. Bruno's best at number 10. He's not a midfielder, and I'll come to the midfield in a second. But Mason Mount, the work that he does on the ball and off the ball, there were so many different bits yesterday that he just looked really slick. He looked like the player that we paid for, and he looked like the player that was touted so highly when he was coming through at Chelsea. Cunha looks fantastic. Every time he's on the ball, there's just that quality about him that we've not seen for someone in a Man United shirt in a long time. And Bomo was frozen out of the game a little bit yesterday, which was disappointing to see, but he was still really good game week 1 against Arsenal. Sesko didn't get a touch of the ball when he came on, which was disappointing, but there'll be time, and I hope he starts in midweek against Grimsby to get a little bit of legs into the system. The main point that I've got, though, is the midfield, because that's where the problem is. That's where United are losing games, because you've got Bruno alongside Casemiro. Casemiro's not got the legs anymore. A few years ago, best defensive midfielder in the world, and you could have him play alongside Bruno because Bruno likes to get forward because he's naturally a number 10, but he can't play that role when you've got Casemiro, who's not got the legs anymore alongside him. Ugarte, whether he's good enough as well to do that job on his own, I'm not so sure. We've got to bring Manu in there, I think. We're going to keep having these problems. United are going to have decent performances and be let down by the midfield multiple times this season, and that's where we're going to falter, and that's where we're not going to finish in those higher spots for the European places if we don't correct this issue. We've got to invest in the midfield if we want to improve. But other than that, there are positives in there. So not quite as positive as coming out of the Arsenal game, but there's still some bits in there.
So United are winning the league off the first 10 minutes of every game this season. And Mason Mount's winning player of the season because that's all he's managing every week. I think the concern's still there. I think they're all still there. And I want to come to what George said about Yoro, which is the stat that I've seen today, that Lenny Yoro has not been in the starting 11 for a single win against a current Premier League side yet. He's been there 13 months. That's unbelievable to hear.
To be fair, he was injured for the first 3 months of being at United, and yesterday and against Arsenal was fantastic. Made some brilliant defensive clearances and stuff. There was one where one of the Fulham players ran, I can't remember who it was, but he does look like a cracking player. Unfortunately, though, that inconsistency from United is where that stat comes from.
I mean, going on to Bayern, the one thing that stuck out to me was I only caught glimpses of the game while I was working, but the one thing that stuck out to me was that Iwobi near post shot that he somehow fumbled for a corner. It's such a simple shot to catch, and it's nearly got in at the near post. And he's conceded a corner to it as well, which is still just as bad as conceding a goal there because there's absolutely nothing there. Bruno has proven my point as well, that everyone seems to have forgotten how to take a penalty this summer. Calvin Bassett realised that the WWE are in the UK this week for that penalty as well. I just think that all the issues are still there. And the biggest concern I'd be asking as a United fan is, and especially after this weekend, is you look at the fact that Arsenal have spent what they spent on attack. And yes, they've struggled in the first game of the season. Second game of the season, come out and scored 5 goals in their first home game. United have spent what they spent on attack and are still struggling to score. The defensive issues are sort of solved. The goalkeeper issue is still there. Defensively, you look a lot more solid. I mean, it comes to something that I watched the Arsenal United game with 2 United fans, that your fans have just resorted to laughing at the club. It was just every time the ball got kicked at Bayern that game, my friend who was a United fan would turn to me and go, even that worried me.
In that case, then just to wrap up, really, a yes or no answer from both of you. I'll start with you, George. Will Amorim be in charge next summer?
Yes.
Chris?
I'd be surprised if he makes it to Christmas if this carries on.
Well, it wasn't one word, but it will have to do. That is everything from us in the Premier League Lowdown review. Tune in again for our preview of Game Week 3. Thank you from me, Chris, and George. That's all.